From McGregor's reputation as an elite striker to Jon Jones and his fierce side both inside and outside the octagon, both champs are alike in their career trajectories and personalities. It's hard to fathom why their paths haven't crossed yet, though both seem to be headed toward a showdown pretty soon. Bones has gone down, come up, and it seems like he's back for good again. As the new heavyweight champ, the UFC bad boys ready to take on at least 3 challengers this year. The goal's looking pretty unrealistic now after his clean sweep of former champion Cyril Gane. His chokehold over the division is pretty solid now, and I have a feeling it's going to make finding challengers much more difficult. If only there was a fighter who's crazy enough to go against anything and everyone, goes all in whether he nosedives or rides high, a man who would hold his own against an equally ruthless competitor like Jones. Now, if only such a person would exist in the UFC. You know, someone like Conor McGregor maybe. The Notorious has as much claim to notoriety and acclaim as the new heavyweight champ and OG rebel of the UFC, Jon Bones Jones. Now, with the Irishman back to his training routine and showing massive gains post-injury, he could very well enter light heavyweight numbers. Though Conor is gunning for nothing but the very top achievement, super heavyweight. He's even compared himself to Ngannou in size as he bragged about his fellow competitor Yoel Romero. The French-Cameroonian heavyweight may have turned free agent, but he still remains a missed opportunity for Jones. The champ said he'd love to get a go at him. Well, perhaps the next best is Conor. Going by his banter about matching Ngannou's nearly 19-stone frame, that's his gold standard for competitors too. From Khabib Nurmagomedov to Dustin Poirier, the former dual champ from Ireland has picked the biggest and bravest fighters to go up against him. Jones ticks all his contender boxes and then some. Plus, he's received admiration and support from Conor several times. The loudest cheers after his victory over Bone Gaiman came from the Notorious, who also made an appearance in the post-fight press conference. That's how close both fighters are, or so it seems to be. Now, put these two contenders against each other, and it would make perfect sense to expect that anything's possible. Of course, Jones's size advantage will need some adjusting too for the lighter Irishman. But as he stated, he's ready to bulk up to 265. As he said to Romero, "I'd say I'm about 265 pound. Yeah, in the bank. I'm heavy in the bank I am." So just like his fellow UFC competitor, Conor's pretty good at building weight and handling 2 divisions at once. His first move was from welterweight to lightweight, and it earned him a double champ status. Also multiplied his fame and pulled him closer to the one category that's been Jones for as long as I can remember in my years as a fan, the light heavyweight division. It's not that big of a stretch for Mystic Mac. Trust me, he's pulled crazier moves than this and come out on top somehow every time. The genius fighter is a smart businessman at the same time. He's made himself an integral part of the UFC in his 10 years in the promotion. Part of this longevity is due to his talent and skills, of course. A major chunk of it, though, is down to the fundamentals of business, staying relevant. McGregor's managed to do it with outrageous and insane proposals, backing them up with sheer willpower and conviction in his abilities. Though it's landed him in trouble more often than not, it's also turned him into one of the biggest stars the sport of mixed martial arts ever produced. Before I get ahead of myself, though, it's important to note that one fighter does stand in the way of GOAT status for Conor. At the moment, no name's bigger or more feared than that status of Jones. Coming back after nearly 3 years out of action, he did something few thought possible. It must have been an inspiring comeback for Conor, who's making his own return to the octagon later this year against Chandler. If he manages to take him down, it would be a bit like following in Jones's footsteps. Given so many similarities between both fighters, you'd think Mystic Mac would be moving up a weight class like his pal did. He's hinted at it several times and seems determined to prove it after pictures of his comeback physique had fans in awe. If he can keep a check on his weight, and with adequate preparation, the path for Conor seems headed straight for a clash with Jones. If not for bragging rights, then maybe the Notorious could do with some humbling rights. Bones has pointed this out too, if not directly to his pal, then to the general public on a live interview. To be fair, Conor was getting too big for his own good. After his few outrageous stunts like that bus incident before UFC 223 and disrespect respect on the mic? Jones said Khabib was exactly what he needed to keep him in check. It's something the Ohio-born champ knows isn't easy to accept. With fighters like him and Conor, the trouble starts when the hype around them gets to their head. Rather than talk on stage all the time, Jones learned to keep his words to a minimum, but let his fists do the talking. That too, inside the cage and not in a UFC parking lot. With McGregor making headlines everywhere recently, he could use some tips from Jones, who's become much more restrained in public. It also shows in his focus on his fights and the respect he gives to his opponents, like he did when he called Stipe for being the greatest heavyweight ever, even as he basically said he wanted to take him to the finish line. Now, that's how you challenge someone to a fight and stay humble at the same time. This is a skill Conor could use dearly, as his ability to run off his mouth has lost him some pretty good opportunities so far, like turning his double champ status into a thing of legend with multiple title defenses that Jones is a red-blooded example of. I'd say Mystic Mac could use some of these lessons in a one-on-one against Jones. After all, isn't that what being the greatest means? Going up against anyone and everyone, especially those with a credible claim to GOAT status like Jones? Now, both the American and his Irish friend have claimed the same status, with Conor especially pitching himself as the top brass for a long while. Well, there's only one way to settle the score. To really put Conor's claim to the test, he would have to go through the ringer with Jones, prepared to go for a total of 5 rounds. If the 34-year-old pay-per-view monster can even make it that far. Apart from his fast and furious striking, the Notorious is also known for one other thing: gassing out before his opponent can tap out. Even when he's winning rounds, it turns into a losing battle between his will to go on and his cardio. Maybe it's both at the same time. Against Khabib, one other fighter with the finesse of John's own smooth operation and intense game, Conor visibly gave up on a solution. As the pressure mounts, he's notorious for giving up and letting it all go down. Interestingly, it's the opposite for Jones. Watch, for example, that turnaround in his 3rd round against Daniel Cormier. DC was winning all the way until the championship rounds, before Jones came back like a hurricane and earned his chops as an endurance champ as well as a tactical genius. It's a stylistic difference of the highest order, one that could teach Conor a useful lesson in survival as he looks to take his game to the next level. From Jones comparing his call-out of Brock Lesnar with the Mayweather-McGregor saga, I do know he's rooting for Conor. Perhaps this way he can also teach his friend some much-needed lessons, especially as Conor's expressed his appreciation for his heavyweight colleagues several times himself. And that's all for why Conor needs to fight Jones.
In a span of just 2 years, this young man has gone from relative unknown to superstardom around the world.